So I've been pushing this off all week, but it had to happen eventually. I had to get around to this. It's not like I have deep, complicated thoughts on this episode. I guess I should say I think this episode is fine. It's good, I guess. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people take this episode and the show as a whole, right, of Loki as like the greatest thing in the MCU. Oh my God, this is amazing. This is revolutionary. This is one of the biggest things the MCU has ever done. No, I don't go that far. I probably don't even get close to that. It's good. I like the show, but I definitely don't think this is like one of the biggest things to happen in the MCU. Well, yes, this has the biggest implications. There were other events that I just liked more, or their execution was better. Well, I think the episode is fine. I don't know. I seem to be on the more negative side of things, even though, again, I'm not negative. This is a good episode. I just don't think this is the best thing ever, which is how some people are taking it. And I guess that's also my view for the show as a whole. But let's get into it. This is For All Time, Always. So we start off with our opening MCU logo, right? Going through all the movies and the scripts and all that. But this time, this is the first time they've ever done this. They use like the audio from the movies in the opening scene. And it's like, hey, what if the opening credits had their audio from the clips? That's actually pretty cool. And it turns into chaos, obviously, but I actually think that's pretty neat. And then we get like an entire history of the universe, I guess, whatever. It's not really a history, but we get like this outer view of all of space and time, which is, I mean, visually it's neat. It carries this sort of grandeur to it because, you know, the multiverse is about to be created. So there needs to be this certain weight to it. And we need to like establish that, hey, this is where we are as a universe as of this moment. But, you know, everything's going to explode after this point. So let's get our timelines in check. Even though I guess after this episode came out, Loki, they retconned the MCU timeline. I don't want to say retcon, that's probably a bad word. But basically how it goes is it goes from this. So basically it goes from Avengers Endgame to this, to WandaVision, to Falcon and Winter Soldier, to Spider-Man Far From Home. So this happens in the MCU timeline before WandaVision, but yet there's a clip from WandaVision in this opening. So yeah, didn't they bring up in the last episode how like, oh, how long has it been since New York? They have no idea. So yeah, time makes no sense. And hey, the multiverse is created. So yeah, but I do like we from this like epic thing of like the universe, we then go into the Citadel at the end of time, which I talked last time about how Alioth guards King the Conqueror's city, and I did actually look it up. It's called Chronopolis, which is, yeah, Chronoopolis. Ha 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 ha. God, it's like naming your city Hydrocity. I like the design. I like how you can see literally the timeline in the background. How it's this ring that like circles it. I think that's really neat. But we see the Citadel of Time, and I like the design of the Citadel of Time. It's like, I don't know if this is real, but I've seen this thing around the internet that there's like, I think it's Chinese or Japanese culture when fine china breaks, when like a pot or glass or whatever breaks, instead of just like throwing it away, they instead fill in like the broken cracks with like gold to like fix it up. And that's kind of what Chronopolis feels like. It's like a castle that was like fixed with gold, because it's black, but there's like gold running through the cracks. I really like that design. I think it's a pretty neat design. This style probably has a name, but I couldn't tell you what it is. But I think it looks pretty good. And then we have Sylvie and Loki are going up to it. Sylvie's kind of nervous, right? She's been waiting for this moment basically her entire life, right? Ever since she was plucked out of her timeline. And now they're finally here. They're finally going to meet the man who's in charge of the TVA, why all of this has happened. It's finally going to happen. But, you know, you've been waiting your entire life for this moment. There's a little bit of nervousness, but the door opens and they're let in. This Minutes gets our little jump scare, and she offers them a deal. She basically gives them a deal that, like, hey, he who remains is impressed with what they've done, that they've gotten this far, and he's willing to offer them a deal to be reinserted back into the timeline. Does Loki want to defeat Thanos? Does he want to defeat the Avengers? Well, they can make that work. Does Sylvie want to have a happy life with a happy childhood and all that? Well, they can make that work. He who remains is all powerful and can put them back on the timeline. Now, based on what happens in the following scenes, I do wonder if this is not that this is bullshit, but more like, is Miss Minutes acting of her own volition? Has she become like a brother eye, an AI who has like achieved sentience and is now fucking with our heroes? That was the question I was asking, because that's kind of what it feels like, especially mainly because of what happens after this, that like she feels like she's acting on her own. And then right, she goes to Ravonna and talks to her, because of course Loki and Sylvie turn her down because they're here for the end. But Miss Minutes goes to Ravonna and is like, hey, I'm going to give you not what you asked for, but what you need. So something's going on there. Ravonna in this moment is what, a contingency plan for He Who Knows? I'm not really sure. We'll get back to Ravonna in a minute, but I'm really not sure what's going on, like where their goal is to take with her. I have no idea, but we'll get back to that. They walk through the Citadel at the end of time. There's like these statues that I think are supposed to be the timekeepers, but they're covered in dust. And one of them is destroyed, which makes me wonder if something's going on there. Like, why is is that just like set design? Is there like some bigger implication to the fact that one of the statues is destroyed? Because we definitely don't get any meaning of that. Is that supposed to hint at the cyclical nature of it all, which we'll talk about at the end? I'm not sure, but it's just a detail. And then they meet He Who Remains. Now, just for the rest of this, I'm going to just call him Immortus, because I'm pretty sure that's what they're going for. That he who, I don't read Marvel comics, but from what I understand, so there's Kang the Conqueror, who is Nathaniel Richards. And then there's Immortus, who is like an older version of Kang, who is a good guy, ? He's not good. I mean, he's not good, but he's like trying to stop Kang. Immortus is trying to stop Kang. And so He Who Remains, who they just call He Who Remains, I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be Immortus. And it's the same actor as Jonathan Majors. It's the same actor as Kang. So yeah, this is supposed to be just some variant of Kang who they call He Who Remains, but I'm going to call Immortus. And so Immortus is not what I expected, right? You do all this serious time stuff, and then you get Immortus, who is just a lot bubblier than I expected. Like, he's got a lot more energy than you'd expect from like being at this endpoint. Now, the way I take it, at least the way I'm interpreting it, is that Immortus, He Who Remains, has ran out of fucks to give. Later on, he'll mention that, oh, he's been in this a long time. Keeping track of all of time is a young man's game. He's far older than he looks. So I take it as he has just ran out of fucks to give. He has done everything. He has seen everything. He does not give a shit. when he comes out, the elevator opens, he's eating an apple. But when I first saw it, I was like, is he eating an onion? What? Which I think, like, even if it was an onion, that would like work, because it's like, oh, he just doesn't give a fuck anymore. right? It's like that one character who eats nothing but tomatoes. Immortus, it's not what you'd expect. It really isn't, but I kind of like that. I get, yeah, you just get the feeling that he just doesn't care because he's been doing this so long, and that's an interesting take. So well, it's not what I'd expect, and it does take a moment to get used to. I actually think it's good. And then yeah, they try to kill him, and they just can't. He's got a temp pad, time travel dealy, and they just can't touch him. They, like, anytime they try to stab him, he just he time travels away. So yeah, they can't stop him on that front. Meanwhile, Mobius talks to Ravonna, as you know, he comes in and disturbs her, and they talk about it, and Ravonna gives the explanation that, oh, it can't all be for nothing. That what they're doing, the whole purpose of the TVA, it can't just be meaningless. Yeah, they're variants, but they must have been plucked out of time for a greater reason. Meanwhile, B-15 is in like some high school. I think it's supposed to be a high school in 2018. And hey, guess what? The real Ravonna, the real Judge Renslayer, is a high school principal. Everything that happens with the TVA in this episode is either left very vague or does not get enough attention, in my opinion. Like, I feel like they're setting something up here that just doesn't get paid off, or it doesn't get explained as well as it could be. It feels kind of like an afterthought. Like, this episode wanted to focus on Loki and Sylvie. It does focus on Loki, Sylvie, and Immortus, but it kind of leaves all the TVA stuff at the sidelines, and we'll get a little bit more of it in a second. But after that, it disappears until like the very end of the episode. Now that they know where the real Ravonna is this breaking up the TVA? I don't know. Again, they don't really go into detail, but I have my theory. After that, with Immortus, he explains to Loki and Sylvie that he let them find him. That everything that has happened up to this point has been his plan. Because remember in that first episode where there was like a throwaway joke about like, hey, sign off to confirm that this is everything you have ever said. And it was like, yeah, that's a funny joke. Well, no, that actually has purpose in this episode. Because in this moment, Immortus reveals that no, he has the real transcripts of everything that's going to happen. He has more information than the TVA because he runs the TVA, and he's been keeping stuff hidden from the TVA. And because of that, he knows everything that's going to happen. They didn't get, he'll later on make a metaphor about how like, everything that has happened with Loki and Sylvie has been predestined. He paved the road and they just walked down it, which I think is, yeah, it just shows his power. That, right, you think the TVA has free will, or I postulated in the first few episodes that, right, there is no free will on the MCU timeline, at least prior to this, that before that, right, the only freedom came from the TVA. And even Ravonna in the previous scene was like, hey, I'm going, or she'll say at one point that she's looking for freedom, right? She's off to find free will. And Immortus in this moment is like, no, even the TVA doesn't have free will. The only person who has free will is me. That's how he's able to predict everything they've done so far. From what it sounds like, he's the one who got, like, remember the beginning of the Nexus event episode, right? They have that moment by the lake, and all of a sudden it causes a flux in the timeline, and the TVA is able to show up and capture them. And it's like, wait, how does that work? What does that have to do with anything? I know in the moment they explain that it's Loki's, like, and narcissism that's like so extreme that it triggered something. From what I understand in this moment, they're explaining that no, Immortus actually triggered that Nexus event. He's the one who set it up so that way the TVA would find them. He couldn't have them dying on Lamentus, so he purposefully, right, set it up so that way the TVA would find them again. That's how I'm choosing to interpret it. That Loki and Sylvie's romantic relationship doesn't have anything to do with this. That it's all Immortus is planning to get them to this very moment. It gets a little meta, and he'll talk about like how, oh, before this all ends, you need to change, right? He couldn't just bring Loki and Sylvie here. They needed to go on a quest. they needed to change as people, which is a little meta, but it's how much do they actually change? Because he calls out Sylvie, like, are you even able to trust anyone? And this happens several times in this episode of Sylvie being like called out, like, hey, can you even trust anybody? You've been on your own for so long now. Are you even capable of trust anymore? Which, yeah, Ravonna and Mobius in their final scene in the final, well, the second to last TVA scene in the entire episode, basically. And it's that only the person in right, this is what I was saying earlier about how like only the person in charge gets free will, that only Immortus has free will because he runs the TVA. Ravonna calls out Mobius on betraying him because, you know, last episode it was, oh, Mobius, he's been, the TVA has been his entire life and now he's willing to betray it at the drop of a hat. And Ravonna calls him out on that, like, hey, we were in this till the end. We were friends till the end. Our friendship is truly rare. None of that's bullshit. But they have a mission, and Mobius strayed from the mission. He betrayed Ravonna. In this moment, I was like, oh no, Ravonna totally betrayed him. But actually hearing her side, I'm like, no, it's a little bit more gray than they're first saying. I kind of like that. I like, because even though the TVA isn't, right, it removes free will from the universe, you see the purpose of the TVA in this episode. So having Ravonna in this moment call out Mobius is, yeah, that's a good thing. And then Ravonna defeats Mobius. They have like a little like fight. It lasts a few seconds. Mobius gets his ass kicked and he can't do anything. And then Ravonna leaves in search of free will. And that's it. That's where Ravonna's storyline ends, which, yeah, that'll probably come up later. Next season or something else like that. I don't know. My thought is that Immortus' like contingency plan, like later on he will talk about how like, oh, time is a circle, that whether they kill him or continue the TVA, it'll eventually circle back and start anew once again, that he will eventually be back in this position. You know, time is infinitely repetitive. And I think maybe that's what Ravonna is in this. It's like some sort of contingency along that line, that it's like this, that Ravonna exists within this like infinite circle. Either that, or she's by her leaving in this moment, she's breaking that circle, which explains the ending of the episode with Kang. Because I think I did mention last episode that Ravonna is Kang's girlfriend in the comics. So maybe that's where they're leaning. Maybe she's gonna go off and meet Kang. But yeah, it's just the TVA kind of feels like an afterthought in this episode because they have so much to explain. Because we're about to get to the exposition dump here. So in my notes, I do everything based on like bullet points and sub bullet points. This one exposition dump is like the next 30 something bullet points in my notes. It's a fucking long exposition dump. Some of it we already know. Some of it is new. It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but it's a lot. I guess that leads me to, this is kind of a slow episode. Usually I'm always down for a little bit of conversation, for a little bit of chit and chat. Both WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier did great jobs at just slowing down for a little bit, doing a little bit of chit and chat, right? A little bit of like what's going on. This episode goes too far with it because they have a lot to explain. They have a lot to set up. You can definitely go too far with exposition. And this is an example of that. Immortus tells Loki and Sylvie that while the TVA is deceptive, their mission isn't. That Immortus is afraid of himself. That, he's been dubbed many things, a conqueror. Okay, yeah. And basically we get his backstory. His backstory is basically in the 31st century. They never say Nathaniel Richards, even though they could theoretically say that, but because he is Nathaniel Richards. Immortus, or one of the many variants of him, discovers travel between dimensions. I guess I should say at some point that, you know, I know King the Conqueror is a comics character from the 1960s, but you know, we perceive things through the media we're engrossed in, and there is currently a season of Rick and Morty going on right now. So of course my thoughts are the whole Rick and Morty, Citadel of Ricks, all that bullshit, Tales from the Ricklantis mix up, Tales from the Citadel, you know, all that bullshit. That's where, like, that's not where this is going, but like that's my thought with this whole like multiversal infinite people travel thing. Like that's like King the Conqueror is going to be like an evil version of that. He discovered multiversal travel, or at least a variant did, and you know, they spread it to the first thing you realize when you discover the multiverse is that you're not the first person to do it. So there's this whole thing about like, oh, they went to other multiverses, they shared technology, they shared information, but not every version of Nathaniel Richards was as good, right? They're not all pure of heart and kind. That some of them, the Kings, saw it as new lands to be conquered. So the variants started fighting with each other, both to preserve their worlds and to destroy the others. In the first episode, it's mentioned in like the TVA debriefing that, hey, the reason the TVA exists is to stop a multiversal war. That's true, but it's to specifically stop Kang's multiversal war. Kang fighting with other Kangs. Yeah, that's, again, it's a really interesting idea. And I like it in Rick and Morty, so of course I am interested in it here. I do have that worry that this can become too complicated. I said the same thing at the time with the Citadel of Rick's episode of Rick and Morty, which name I don't remember off the top of my head. That I was like, at some point, when do you become too complicated? When does this become too much bullshit? And I have depending on how they do Kang, I do worry that this might become too much bullshit. If we get at like some point, if we're getting like infinite multiversal Kangs and a Citadel of Kangs and all this bullshit, at what point does it become too much? Because this is totally the type of character that you can just do too much with. That like too much is going on, the too many variants, too many multiverses. This is totally something that can go off the rails and quick. So that is worrisome, to say the least. At least that's a worry I have in the back of my head. It may never come to fruition. Marvel has earned the benefit of the doubt, which they are stressing right now. I mean, they're doing a fucking Eternals movie. Come on. But they have earned the benefit of the doubt. I'm willing to give them the chance that, hey, you know what? Kang can be complicated and stupid, but he could in theory be cool, so maybe they can do great stuff with him. We find out what Alioth is, that he's created from like the tears in reality. He like consumes space and time. The way they describe it, it makes me think of not the bleed wall, but it's like like in a comic, there's like the white borders between comic pages. I know in the DC universe, that's like a thing. And that's kind of what it makes me like Alive feels like to me, is he's like the physical manifestation of like the white walls between the comic pages, but he also has he can create and he can destroy. At least that's kind of what it feels like. And that in this universe, Immortus harnessed Alive, used his power to destroy every other universe except for presumably his own. That's what he did. Immortus is not a good guy. Later on, he'll just be like, yeah, listen, we're all villains here. Because yeah, Immortus, he stopped Kang, but it came at a price. He got rid of free will in the universe. He used Alioth to destroy infinite numbers of realities. He is not a good person in this moment, but he believes what he does is necessary. Because he puts it like, if you think I'm evil, wait until you see the variants of me. That his variants are far worse. And that, right, if he is defeated, if they stop him in this moment, something far worse will fill the void. Which, yeah, I've seen a lot of talk in the past. Again, it's been about a week since this episode came out. So I've seen a lot of talk about how, like, Kang is, like, even like a bigger, badder deal than like, of course, right now the comparison point we have in the MCU are what? Thanos, Ultron. Are there any other big bad villains? And even Ultron was kind of underutilized. But right now Thanos is our big bad guy. Fucking Jeff Goldblum's character. But yeah, Kang is like our new big bad guy, because we don't like, there is no Magus in the MCU. There is no Galactus. There's no Doctor Doom, which, you know, I have I said before, I'm not actually looking forward to a Fantastic Four movie. I don't actually personally care for the Fantastic Four, but I do want to see Doom done right. It's got to happen eventually. Someone's got to get Doom right, and this is our best chance. He's something I'm way more interested in. But yeah, I've seen like all this talk about how like, oh, Kang is our big new bad guy. So yeah, it is interesting that doing this whole thing with like Kang being our big new bad guy, we're introducing him super early right now. I mean, we know Kang is going to be in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But like even still, we're introducing Kang very early on. It's like, yes, Thanos technically shows up at the end of the first Avengers movie, but they don't really do anything with him until what? Infinity War? I mean, yeah, he's in Guardians, he's in technically Avengers 2, but they don't do anything with him. And now we're introducing Kang, and yes, we technically don't see Kang in this episode, but they're building him up as the next big bad guy, and I wonder how much they're going to get to in this season. I wonder how much, or in this season, in this version, in this phase 4 of the MCU, how much are we really going to get? Because I know we're building towards the Thunderbolts. We're building towards what, a Dark Avengers? Maybe that might be the Thunderbolts again. That confuses the shit out of me. I know we're building towards Young Avengers, like several of those characters have showed up. So eventually this is all going to pay off eventually, but it's a lot. A lot is going on right now with Kang. But I know Kang is our next big new bad guy. He's our BBEG. From there, Sylvie is just like, oh yeah, all that could be true. You could be stopping the multiverse from, right, the other evil versions of you, or you could just be a liar. So that leaves them with two options. Immortus basically gives them two options. They can kill him and create the multiverse, which he's going to let them kill him, but that would create infinite devils, as he puts it, right? Infinite Kangs, infinite devils. So yeah, that's bad. Or their second option is that Sylvie and Loki take over the TVA and preserve the timeline. They tell the people what's going on, who Immortus is, what's up with Kang and the infinite evil versions of him, and they fight to preserve the timeline. Sure, they're taking away free will, but they're stopping the infinite devils. Not a bad deal. Again, it's kind of, that's what Loki wanted. In the first episode, he wants to meet with the second episode, he wants to meet with the timekeepers and take over the TVA. That's his end goal. So in this moment, he's given that chance, but he doesn't take it, which just shows how much he has grown and changed as a character throughout the course of the show. Or like Immortus said earlier, they have to complete the quest, go on a journey, they have to change before they could come here. And Loki is given the opportunity to the throne and he doesn't take it, even though Sylvie expects him to. Because Immortus calls out Sylvie and is like, tells her to grow the fuck up. That right, she's been doing all this running, she's been doing all this fighting, but she's still calling him a liar here. Her goals are still childish in a way. And yeah, this is where Immortus gives the line like, we're all villains here. We've all done terrible things. Loki tried to conquer all of Earth. Immortus killed infinite timelines. Sylvie killed who know how many people, including TVA. Right? They're all villains in this moment. Because that's an important thing to like keep in perspective here, is that no matter what outcome gets chosen, none of these are good guys. Of course, there is irony that Loki in Sylvie. In Sylvie is a variant, but right, the most important decision in the entire MCU is made by Loki. That's kind of villains. They say that it's a chance to do a bad thing, but for good reasons. Because again, infinite devils. It's a decision, and it's not a good one. This is a lose-lose scenario, but as Kang is trying to put it, there are worse ways to lose. And then they cross the threshold, which is the point, right? Immortus says that, oh, he knows everything that's going to happen, but they cross the threshold, which is the point where he has no idea what's going on, right? From here, this is their option, right? He no longer knows, are they going to kill him? Are they going to take over? He doesn't know. Is this the end of, because the whole thing with the timekeepers was like they were writing time until the end of time. And at the end of time, everything's going to be in peace. But now in this moment, it's like Immortus has reached the end of his time. I'm thinking back to what the Doctor Strange scene with the Ancient One, where she can, see the future, but she can't see past this one moment. And that's kind of where we're at here, where Immortus knows everything. But now that he's past the threshold, anything is possible, right? He hopes that they take over. But even if they don't and they just kill him and create the multiverse, well, hey, he'll be back. And it's up to Sylvie and Loki to decide his fate. But he's not too worried about it because he brings up reincarnation, right? Because, right, as we see the timeline in the background, even though it's starting to splinter at this point, it's all cyclical, right? The timeline is a circle. So even if they kill Immortus and create the multiverse, eventually one of those multiversal branches will create a new Immortus who will harness Alioth and destroy all the other multiverses. So this is reincarnation. They'll be back in this same spot again another time, and they will theoretically make this decision an infinite number of times because infinite multiverses. Of course, the ending of the episode does make me question that they do brand that, even though he expects them to come back to the same point that they are here now, he actually fails, right? That time is a circle, but the next time this happens, we get a different outcome. Because, free will now exists in the universe, and maybe that's Ravana's fault. Loki wants to talk about Sylvie's all aboard killing him, right? That's her entire goal. That is her glorious purpose. Everything she's done up to this moment has been leading to killing Immortus, the Timekeepers, whatever. Loki wants to talk about it because this is the biggest decision in the entirety of the MCU, and the fact that it's happening in this TV show is, again, we're out of the original 23 something MCU movies. They stand on their own. They're good. They're safe. Anything that happens after this point, it's not like it can go back and retroactively destroy those things. I mean, it could, but it's not like it stops those movies from existing. It's kind of like when people get mad at like a TV show reboot and claiming that it ruins their childhood. No, it fucking doesn't. The original show exists. You can just go watch the original Powerpuff Girls. Don't give a fuck about the reboot. Everything that's happening here is bigger than them. Loki admits that he believes Immortus, that, yeah, this Infinite Devils thing, he's telling the truth. This is bad. This only ends badly for us if we make the wrong decision. Sylvie, on the other hand, is like, can't trust, right? It's been beaten into the point that Sylvie can't trust anybody. And she can't trust Loki because, Loki wanted the throne. He wanted to take over the TVA. And now in this moment, he's given the chance to take over the TVA, even though Loki says he doesn't care for that anymore. And that, right, Sylvie can't trust people and Loki can't be trusted. So they end up getting in a fight over it because, the cost of getting this decision wrong is too big to risk. So they get in this fight, and this is our one, again, we've had this giant exposition dump. We've got all this explanation, and I don't think action, right? Like, you don't just flip between action and exposition. That's not how stories work. There are many other things, but this is our one brief little moment. It's supposed to be, right? There's that whole saying about how action is a conversation, right? That people fighting is a conversation, right? Them enacting their viewpoints. And that's what it's supposed to be here. That this is Loki and Sylvie fighting over what decision to make. Loki, basically Sylvie beats Loki, but he uses magic to teleport right before, and right, she's got the blade on his neck right before Sylvie can kill Immortus. And Loki admits that, I just want you to be okay. And then they kiss. Ugh. This was inevitable. I don't know, man. I knew this. I knew this was going to happen last episode. I knew this was going to happen after the Nexus event. But I was just kind of hoping, I think it was Red from Overly Sarcastic Productions pointed out that Loki falling in love with another version of Loki is not even in the top 10 weirdest things Loki has banged. So like this isn't even close. But yeah, but those myth. But I mean, the Poetic Edda by Snorri Sturluson. I got that name wrong. Was written in what 1100. Times have changed. Again, I just can't defend this. I don't like it. Doesn't destroy the show for me. It doesn't, but it doesn't also help the show any. And I'm not gonna say this is like the reason why I don't think Loki, like, I don't want to come up here and say like, oh, the reason I don't like think Loki is one of the best things ever is because of the self-cessed. I'm not saying that. That's not the only, that is a factor, but it is far from the only factor why I don't think the show is like the best thing ever or anything. You know what I'm saying? You can't write this out. It also isn't the only reason, right? I know I've been involved in shipping wars, what, like 6 years ago now, but who fucking cares anymore? I don't know. I just don't like it. Okay. This is just, self-cess is fucking weird. That's all I gotta say. It could be worse. It could be worse. It could literally just be Tom Hiddleston playing off of Tom Hiddleston, which I think would be worse. At least they have a different actor in the role. But I don't know. And then so after they kiss, Sylvie, because Immortus takes off his timepiece when he crosses the threshold, Sylvie picks it up, opens a portal, and shoves Loki through. She then turns around and kills Immortus. And Immortus, as he's dying, is just like, see you soon. Again, it's all a flat circle that will infinitely repeat. They'll be back in the same situation, or at least that's what he expects. And that just leaves Sylvie all alone in the Citadel of Time at the end of time. Again, I'm thinking pop culture. Okay, so spoiler alert for the anime Mira Nikki. It's a 10-year-old anime, Future Diaries. It's good. I don't know. I hear the manga ends differently, but I have no interest in watching the show again. I have no interest in reading the manga. But basically how that show ends is they create an alternate universe where all the characters get happy endings, but the hero kills the girl. And then it's like, oh, well, okay, he kills the girl, but hey, they've created a new universe where everyone gets a happy ending and everything is good. And then in one final twist, you find out that no, the guy from the first universe, which is actually the second universe, is still alive and he's stuck forever alone in that second universe. So he's fucked. And of course, even though they get the power of God, they can't bring people back from the dead because, you know, the show has to have tension and, you know, they have to make one bullshit rule that breaks everything because, again, Mira Nikki's really good. It's just I have no intention of ever watching it again. But that's kind of what Sylvie feels like here at the end of time, or at least that's the association my brain makes, is that, yeah, she kills Immortus, but now she's just all alone in her own universe. That's it. She's lost everything. She's lost the person she loves. And now it's just Sylvie at the end of time. Because after she kills Immortus, she starts crying. And yeah, it's a sad moment. And I thought the moment in Mira Nikki was all like, the ending it's fine, but like that moment just like, it's like, oh fuck, that's a great just like final twisting. And yeah, I think this also works here, right? That it's Sylvie alone. Does Sylvie exist anymore? Because in the background, the multiverse is being created. Who fucking knows? I most certainly don't. But yeah, in the background, the multiverse is being created, right? You start off with the big thick line and then it starts branching out and those branch and eventually before you know it, it's like a web. It's like a web. I wonder if there's any multiverse shenanigans that involve a web. Maybe there's like a Madam Web who connects them? I don't know. It's what you'd expect. It also, like, you know, there's that whole thing about like, oh, how looking at something really close up is looking at something far away. Looking at the multiverse as it like branches out and like webs out. It also kind of reminds me of like neurons firing in a brain, which is just, right, that's fine. Loki is back at the TVA. He's heartbroken. We see a scene of B-15 and Mobius being like, hey, there is no turning back, and B-15 like, there never was. Which the way, so part of me is assuming that once they cross the threshold, this is all assumption on my part. The show never actually says this, but what I'm assuming how it works is that it's not just crossing the, because like the second they cross the threshold, the multiverse starts to create, right? Like you see the branches happening in the background. Part of me is assuming that meanwhile, while that's going on, meanwhile at the TVA, Mobius and B-15, now knowing that like, hey, they're all variants and everything, have like stopped working. They've stopped responding to problems in the multiverse. That basically the TVA, because Loki and Sylvie don't go back to turn back on the TVA just shuts down, and as a result, the multiverse is created. Like they never say that in the show, but that's what I'm assuming they mean. Like, oh, if they had never done this, the TV, even with Immortus dead, the TVA would continue to function. But because, you know, they made everyone realize they're variants, Mobius and B-15 convinced everyone else to stop working. And as a result, the multiverse is created. Like, it's nothing to do with Immortus dying that creates the multiverse. That's just kind of like a consequence of it, that they can't keep the TVA, that Immortus or can't keep the TVA running or can't convince Loki and Sylvie to do it. So Loki is heartbroken back at the TVA. Again, he's lost everything, and that I mean, the only thing he didn't lose is his life, and he technically did lose that as well. He goes around, because, you know, right, he tries to warn Mobius and B-15 about the whole multiverse, right? That Kang is coming, that everything's going to go to shit, infinite devils. I flashed onto that phrase, infinite devils. I kind of like that. And it's too late. They don't know, Mobius and B-15 don't know who Loki is. I think they assume he's like an accountant or something. They don't know who Loki is. So something is up, and then he looks over, and before where the statue of the three timekeepers is, there's now just one statue. Kang the Conqueror. Which, yeah, that's okay. So like it does suck that Mobius and B-15 don't know who Loki is. That kind of sucks, and I do worry where that's gonna go. But I think the actual reveal that, hey, the TVA is still around, but now Loki is in like an alternate universe or alternate reality TVA, but this one ruled by Kang the Conqueror. That's a holy fuck moment. That's a great reveal at the end of the episode. Just seeing the statue of Kang is like, oh shit. Immortus thinks that this is all cyclical, that when he dies, he'll just be reincarnated, he'll harness Goliath, and he'll recreate the one timeline. But it looks like, no, that's not the case. And now we have a new TVA that is created and run by Kang, presumably to either keep the multiversal war going or to make sure Kang stays in power or whatever. Because right, there's no, now that the multiverse box has been unleashed, it looks like they aren't stopping it. Kang is now in charge of the TVA. So what ramifications does that have? Holy shit, that's an ending. There are a lot of plot points left open in this episode, right? This entire ending thing with like, hey, there's now a new TVA, the Kang the Conqueror. What the heck happened with Ravonna earlier? So, and our post-credit scene is just confirmation that, hey, this show will get a season 2. Which I'm glad, because I would be annoyed if this did, based on how this ends and a lot of the things left unanswered, I'd be disappointed if this didn't get a season 2. I mean, sure, some of it will probably get answered in Ant-Man, which will probably come out before season 2 of this. But still, like, the way this ends, you want a second season. It's just, there's too many open ends to this show that if there wasn't a second season, I would be generally disappointed. Like, for all of its things, Falcon and Winter Soldier ends, right? Like, yeah, there are plot points left open, but you know what? We're getting a Captain America 4. WandaVision ends also pretty conclusively. Yeah, sure, there's the one bit, but hey, Multiverse of Madness. This, on the other hand, it's like, okay, we've set up Kang the Conqueror, so that goes into Ant-Man. But there are just too many loose, like, most of these other shows end with like one, maybe like two loose ends. This show just has too many going on. So having a second season, no, that's pretty. I'm glad they're doing it. I'm glad this is getting a second season. And even though I don't think, like, I still like WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier more than this show. I am totally down for a second season. I'm down for a second season of any of these shows, but I'm glad this is the one that gets one. Because, yeah, this one definitely deserves it. I'm just curious to see where they go. This multiverse thing, this whole Kang twist at the end. Yeah, that's a lot. It's going to be great. It should be, again, Marvel has earned the benefit of the doubt. It's going to be great, hopefully. Yeah, that's the episode. There's a lot of exposition. There is a lot of exposition. They have a lot to get through. I remember how I said Nexus Event and Journey into Mystery kind of felt like endings, right? Those episodes kind of feel like finales. Yeah, I still stand by that, especially because here in this ending, because it's so much of just characters sitting in a room delivering exposition, that all like the big action moments, all like the big stuff that would normally entail a finale in a Marvel movie was all the last two episodes. And this episode has slowed us down and is just getting us our exposition out. And now, to be fair, I think the exposition is as much as they have to deliver, I think it's delivered about as well as you can do it. Like they keep it interesting. At no point was I like bored or anything, because I am invested enough in where this is going. I like the episode and I like the show. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. This show has by far the biggest implications on the MCU, whether that be Multiverse of Madness, the What If, which starts in just a few weeks, or, Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumanium. We're going to see the ripple effects of this. Of course, because COVID, it won't be for a while, because most of those movies have been pushed back like a year. I don't know, we're still getting a Spider-Man this year, and people are convinced that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are going to be in that. I don't know. I'm not getting my hopes up, honestly. I kind of don't want them to be in it, because I'd rather just focus on like the whole Spider-Man getting his identity revealed thing. I don't want them to just rip off Spider-Verse, because again, we have a really good Spider-Verse. I don't need a rip off of that. I think the show is fine. I think the show is good. I liked it. I don't think it's better than the other two shows we've gotten, which I liked more, but I think this is good. I think this is just a solid show that, and also part of it might be that part of something in this show's favor is that I think this is one of the more like WandaVision, I have no real desire to rewatch. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I have no real desire to rewatch. I'd probably rewatch this. Yeah, I'd probably rewatch this show. So to that end, it's doing something right, and I'll give it that. With that, I hope you all enjoyed. Stay tuned for more. Until next time, peace.